a New Orleans hospital during and after Hurricane Katrina.
We knew the lights were going to go, but we were fully operational until the loss of water.
Dialysis requires two critical things, water and power, neither of which are in abundant supply right now.
We've got 3 patients on artificial hearts here. I think a lot of the pressure was to think that you could take somebody so far from a near death to an artificial heart and then lose them because of a power loss would just be an unacceptable outcome and devastating to everybody involved.
We're down to 3 hospitals out of 12 in the New Orleans area.
Only 3 surviving hospitals out of 12. Would the hospitals serving your community be able to survive and even thrive during a disaster? A hurricane, a flood, an earthquake, a tornado, a terrorist attack, an outbreak of avian flu. I'm John Goodman. Next, the story of a New Orleans hospital that survived Hurricane Katrina. Part of it was luck, but the hospital had also learned from the hardships of others.
Funding for this program has been provided by AT&T, Lehman Brothers, Cardinal Health Foundation, and by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
Doctors, nurses, and executives at Ochsner Medical Center in New Orleans have been planning for decades for the big hurricane they fear will someday fill the bowl-shaped city with water. On a late Friday afternoon in August 2005, they realize it's time to carry out those plans. Forecasts show a monstrous storm is likely headed straight towards New Orleans.
We knew the water was hot, so we knew hot water means strong hurricanes. I don't think anyone could predict the scale of this hurricane.
And by Sunday afternoon, it's going to be off the mouth of the river here with winds of 120 knots.
This was the storm that we have feared for generations.
We pulled the trigger and we got all of our emergency supplies in. We got a week's supply of food and water. We got pharmaceuticals, medical supplies.
The people at Ochsner have learned from other hospitals crippled by Mother Nature's wrath. Just 1 year earlier, they rushed to the rescue when Hurricane Ivan ripped part of the roof off Baptist Hospital in Pensacola. The storm surge flooded the emergency room. The combination of high winds and water also knocked out electricity and shut off the public water supply. It took a month to restore running water.
They wanted like five pallets of plastic bags because, after the storm, there's damage, there's cleanup. They used all their bags. They had none after the first day of the storm. They wanted Visqueen. They wanted construction material to repair windows and board up stuff. They also wanted fans. We had never had a fan before this last year, but we had purchased in February of 2005 one fan for every patient room, and which was like 450 fans, and we had another 250 larger fans for work areas.
Ochsner also gets in porta potties just in case the hospital loses any part of its water supply. While most people are leaving the city, companies are shipping in supplies to Ochsner.
They stepped up and they worked among themselves to make darn sure that those wheels were rolling on those 18-wheelers, and they came in nonstop. Whatever it took, they got here.
Procedures are also in place to get additional food in the event of an emergency.
There's a major food distribution center right here within a block of the hospital, and we had an arrangement with them. If there was a storm, they told us how to break into the warehouse.
The supplies begin arriving the Saturday before the storm, but most top staffers aren't around to receive them. Instead, they are moving forward with day 2 of a retreat that has been scheduled for months. The retreat is just minutes away from the hospital. It turns into an opportunity to rally the troops just before what could be one of the most challenging times of their careers.
Personalize nothing, have an impeccable word, and the final one is do your best. Not kind of your best, do your best every day. We have to be in for the long haul. We'll have to be in for those moments of truth that occur every day when there's time to make a decision about what you'll do, what you'll say, and what you won't do.
It showed us that we can do whatever we need to do the right thing, and it really created a bond of unity among Ochsner physicians that I had never seen before.
Throughout Saturday evening and Sunday morning, top executives make last-minute decisions during teleconferences. This, as the forecast becomes more disturbing.
You're looking at 175-mile-an-hour winds that's pushing those clouds around, right around that.
The hospital's emergency plan calls for both an A team and a B team. The A team will cover the hospital so that the B team can get out of harm's way. As members of the A team prepare for duty, they have to make tough decisions involving their families.
I have my family. I have a 4-year-old daughter who's living in a hotel with my husband somewhere in Dallas.
I'm glad I have my husband and my little girl with me, so that's most important.
The patients have relatives who don't want to leave them behind.
My dad's in the hospital. He's been in and out for the last 6 weeks, and me and the family members didn't want him to be here during the hurricane alone.
Administrators embrace these families with some trepidation.
We discourage people, obviously, from trying to bring family members in that are on the essential list. I think that's been our communication from day one. However, we also recognize that some people are in the situation where they have no other choice.
As Sunday progresses, the A team makes its way into the hospital.
I came in at 3 o'clock on Sunday, right before the storm hit. It was calm. It was a lot of anxiety.
Despite the evidence of danger looming, some are still hopeful that New Orleans will once again skirt disaster.
I'd packed some stuff, and you're like, yeah, it's going to be bad. But deep inside, you thought, this is just going to be, another, miss. But I had a little bit more anxiety because I believe the winds were like 195 miles an hour, or, that morning, when I was coming in.
This is the third time that I've done this hurricane activation thing, and every time it's been, you pack a bag and you come and you stay up late and you giggle and you should have a roommate and, it's all fun and games. You watch the storm go by outside the emergency room doors and you wake up in the morning and you're able to leave.
Staff members and patients' relatives are not the only people showing up.
Initially it was really, really frustrating and sad because all these people are just trying to drop their family members off and, a place to stay.
Ochsner has an advantage over other facilities. It has a hotel attached to the hospital.
In the Army, it's 2 hots and a cot. Can you get a hot meal? Can you have a place to sleep? And can you have a place to take care of yourself? And the more you have that, the longer you can not only endure, but endure with some effectiveness.
One last patient also shows up as high winds foreshadow the approaching storm.
I had to come in because I was having chest pains. I'm a cardiac patient of Ochsner. This time I had to come drive myself to Ochsner. I had nobody to bring me up.
Administrators insist on having precise records of every individual in the hospital.
It's going to be an ongoing effort, and we really want to make sure by this evening that we have everybody registered and banded.
Executives are also communicating with other hospitals that may need to come to their rescues. One of these hospitals is Memorial Hermann, a branch of the Texas Medical Center in Houston. Staffers at Memorial Hermann know how to conduct a massive hospital evacuation. They conducted one following Tropical Storm Allison in 2001.
The Texas Medical Center campus had taken on too much water and had overpowered, obviously, our generator system. And so therefore we had no power in the hospital here, no air conditioning, no support services. Within 36 hours, 538 patients have been evacuated from this campus. And this campus is a regional trauma center as well as a tertiary care facility, so we do the high-end services. So most of our patients are usually highly and acutely ill. And we moved all 536 patients in 36 hours without a fatality or an injury to our staff or to the patients being moved.
Herman was great with us, and the CEO called us immediately afterwards and said, I'm a phone call away. If you need any help, let us know. And we said we'd be happy to if we can get a phone call to you, if our phones work.
As gusts from the hurricane gradually pick up, all available staff members are called into a meeting at 7 p.m. on Sunday evening. The first order of business is to appeal to a higher power.
Lord, help us be instruments of your peace.
And then it is telling the staffers what they can expect from administrators and what administrators will expect from staffers.
The meal service is going to be a little bit lean. Obviously, the one thing we're very interested in is making sure our supplies last for the duration of the storm. We do want to set up a curfew for around 8 o'clock to have people stop roaming the halls. I think that's the time we're expecting to see conditions deteriorate. We're going to try and discourage people from going outside. It's going to be dangerous. We understand that there are people who like to check the weather. And to that end, you need to carry your badge and be safe. I've walked some of the halls and heard some of the drastic scenarios that people have thought in their minds. I think we've all thought them. It's okay. We do understand the city we live in, and that means we have to think a little bit outside the box, or outside the levees, as the case may be. You know, we're here to serve the people that are sitting in our beds and the community that is looking to us for some leadership in healthcare. So I think it's important that we keep that in mind as we go into the storm.
We did keep open the top of the garage so that after the event, if need be, we can have helicopters land on top of the garage.
Staffers are also forewarned there may be no limits to what will be expected from them if Katrina creates the path of destruction some fear.
It doesn't matter really what our job description is. We're all going to pitch in food service, a mop, a broom, doing whatever it takes to help people get through this.
And then there are those people who are using the hospital as a shelter.
You will be asking security to help move those family or visitors to their assigned sleeping space for the night. If they don't have assigned sleeping, we'll be sure to get them some assigned sleeping so that they're not in the atrium.
The glassed-in atrium is not the only area of concern.
In Pensacola, they had their air handling unit come off their roof. Now, ours are bolted into I-beams. They're sitting, very structurally sound, but, we're going to do the best we can, and we need everybody alert, on point, because we may need your help. And if you got ideas, if you think we're doing something wrong, tell us. I mean, there's no pride in authorship here.
Employees ask a few questions and make a few suggestions, and then everyone takes up his or her posts, many with heavy hearts amid the uncertainty of what lies ahead.
I always feared that the clinic was not going to stay up. I mean, it's a big storm. Huge storm. I was feared for our lives, for everybody's lives.
That fear is also growing in the community.
We had one lady that showed up the night of the storm. They must have had 75-mile-an-hour wind. And we told her to go to the Superdome, and she was like, I'm not going to the Superdome.
And then the hours arrive when Katrina unleashes her wrath over a 200-mile stretch of the Gulf Coast from just west of New Orleans to the Florida Panhandle. Ochsner is on the western edge of the storm.
It literally sounded like someone had a sledgehammer outside and was banging on the building and on the windows, and it was obvious the wind gusts were phenomenal.
The impact of the storm is strongest on the top floor of the hospital, the 11th floor.
The whole time that the hurricane was going on, the air was coming through those vents, I guess circulating that room and coming through and howling, this really loud howl. You could, you feel it. And then the windows along that room were all leaking water. The whole wing was leaking water. The water was coming through the windows to the floor. And I would say it had a good half-inch to an inch of water on the patient floors all the way, like from the window to the hall. So we were just soaking that up. That whole wing, we just decided that the people on this wing over here, we needed to get them out of those rooms because we didn't want any windows busting on them.
They had been in the hallway maybe 10 minutes, and one of the windows broke in one of the patient rooms. And it was amazing. It sounded like there was a 1,000-pound gorilla in there throwing the furniture and the bed. It was obviously lifting up, smashing into the wall. And it was pretty quiet, and I took a step up the stairs to go towards the roof, and I looked up and there was nothing but sky. And then all of a sudden my feet started moving off the ground because there was suction in there, and I hurried up and got back in and took 4 guys to shut the door.
Amid the turbulence, some are fearful this hurricane will live up to the worst projections.
I was just completely panicked. I was like, oh my God, what if the levee breaks? What if we go underwater?
It's a bit scary, you don't know what's going outside, because fortunately here at Ochsner they have a shutter over the patient's windows.
so you can't see outside, and it's like a secondary support in case the glass breaks.
The hospital loses public utilities.
The power went first, smart enough. They flipped the generator power before, so we had an easy transition for that.
We didn't ever lose generator power to the point where we're having to bag patients. The ventilators are all working.
At this point, other hospitals are bagging patients, breathing for them by hand. Generators are powering all of Ochsner's life support systems and air conditioning to 25% of the hospital.
We were fully operational until the loss of water.
The hospital has its own private well, a well that was put in during initial construction 6 decades earlier.
There was rumors that the well would only provide water to the first 5 floors, and that was new. That Baptist didn't have any water for a long time. I think it was almost a month. So we figured we would definitely need that water, and one of our maintenance managers had that whole well rebuilt, and it was just completed in May of 2005, 2 months before the storm. We actually had enough pressure to do the entire hospital to the 11th floor of the building.
The well water is fine for flushing toilets and taking showers. Executives are insecure about allowing it to be used for drinking or cooking, but administrators have planned for this.
And it just seems like it was within, a little time span that here comes people up from purchasing with these carts and like, here's your fans, here's your extension cords. So, and then, we distribute them to all the patient rooms and we put them in the hallway so the patients that were out there could have air. We put them at the nurse's station. A little while later, here comes somebody and they said, here's your water. You got 1 gallon of water per patient per day. Things were just clicking along.
Some staffers try to get some rest. They know most of the building is being covered by only 2 shifts. They don't know what will be left in the wake of the hurricane.
I took 2 Benadryl to sleep, but I could feel not only the room shake, but the windows shake. We're on generator power, but we lost air. So, it's 89 degrees, covered in sweat.
Doctors are restless about checking on their patients after the brunt of the storm passes through early Monday morning.
In the beginning, it was a survival mode. The survival mode goes away, and then you have to go on and take care of your patients.
Administrators are also moving forward, assessing the overall impact of the hurricane.
The thing we've been most concerned about is the structural integrity of our facility, which really has held up quite amazingly well. So far we're not through this yet. The storm is still blowing right now. The patients have done exceedingly well. We have in excess of 400 patients here at our facility. We're pretty full. Due to the wind and the direction of the rain, we have had a lot of various leaks throughout the organization.
The small panes in the atrium blew out and have quite a bit of glass and water from that. And of course, this place was not designed to be car washed. In effect, we get a lot of horizontal water, so we have lots of leaks through the vents and the windowsills, and then the loss of the rubberized covering for the roof.
Despite the upbeat tempo, administrators know they have some problems. Ochsner has patients who need dialysis.
Dialysis requires 2 critical things, water and power, neither of which are in abundant supply right now. So we are hoping that with our existing water and power, even using the well water, that we'll be able to dialyze our existing inpatients and presumably new inpatients that come in who have acute needs for dialysis.
The laboratory is highly automated and computerized, and the heat just took its toll. So we were pulling the insides of the instruments out to expose the circuit boards, having fans with ice packs and dry ice to cool those instrument boards so we would stop getting temperature errors so we could report out our testing on our patients.
Even as the building maintenance staff and administrators assess their losses, high winds are still pounding the hospital, knocking out even more air conditioning.
Some of the mechanical systems tied to our chillers got blown off our roof. So our facility got hot pretty quick. We really started to think about patients that are on vents. Some of our critically ill infants were in our NICU.
Staffers wrestle with busy telephone circuits while trying to get help in evacuating patients. The first calls are made to Louisiana's Office of Emergency Preparedness.
The emergency management offices were both overwhelmed. Most of the helicopters that were around were really in search and rescue mode. There was also other facilities that were in a lot more difficult position than we were. I think we realized at that point we really need to take some of this into our own hands.
There is one patient who has to be moved, and moved quickly to save her life. Ochsner turns to Memorial Hermann Hospital in Houston for help.
I got a phone call at home from one of the administrators at Ochsner, and they were requesting assistance because they had a patient that was a transplant patient. And with transplant patients, there's a window of time in which you can do organ transplantation. So we went ahead and arranged an air evac by our fixed-wing service and got her to Houston so we could continue the life-saving efforts of organ transplantation.
While the transplant patient is being airlifted off to Houston, it becomes a lot more uncomfortable at Ochsner. The temperature is soaring. The small fans offer little help to very sick patients.
We've got 3 patients on artificial hearts here.
Some are less critical, some are more critical. Transplant patients, heart patients. And this situation is really, really very dangerous for them because they're losing fluid that we can't count. We can only look at labs and stuff, and then our lab system's not working right.
Well, this heat from the air conditioning being off would make anybody miserable, especially if you're running a fever and you have a tracheostomy.
Nurses are resorting to primitive methods to cool their patients down.
I bathed him for 12 hours last night, pretty much in ice water, just to keep him cool and comfortable.
While staffers are improvising to solve their problems, they are also learning of troubling situations at the only official shelter in New Orleans, the Superdome, which is housing tens of thousands of people.
One of our flight care nurses is also in the National Guard, and she got activated to the Superdome. And the night after the storm, she called and, said there wasn't enough medicine for these people. They didn't have their medicines. They were just, opening up a room for a temporary morgue.
Meanwhile, the hospital receives a call from one of its new employees, a physician who has been diverted to another location.
As a pathologist, it turned out that the best role I could play at that time was to be a procurer of medications. So I, with the help of another pharmacist in the New Orleans Police Department, we waded across Canal Street and broke into the Walgreens pharmacy and were able to pilfer, if you will, most of the medications out of that pharmacy, and we're able to bring it back, and with the help of these other physicians, we're able to set up a clinic in the French Quarter bar. And it got dramatic at times. Of course, one of the things I forgot to get at the pharmacy was rubbing alcohol, so I had to give insulin injections using wild turkey as a skin sterilization, it's a very effective skin sterilizer, among other things.
On Tuesday morning, maintenance crews discover another potential threat to staffers and patients.
What came to my attention just probably half an hour ago was that we realized that we had substantial amount of water on the top of the parking garage, and it was because some of the roofing material that had blown off was covering one of the major drains.
Administrators are quickly realizing the troubles at their hospital pale in comparison to what's going on in the rest of New Orleans. Storm surges have whipped the water in the Mississippi River for hours, causing it to wear down the levee system. The man-made walls are collapsing and will soon submerge 80% of the city with water. Some neighborhoods get as much as 10 feet of water. Efforts are underway to evacuate almost every hospital in or near New Orleans.
I know people that work at Kenner Regional that they pretty much they can't work. I talked to somebody earlier who said, for the most part, he doesn't have a job.
We have to be thankful because I think our hospital is probably the only functional hospital in the East Bank area over here. I've heard about Tulane, I heard about Charity, and also VA Hospital. They had to evacuate the patients because of the flooding over here.
I spent 3 nights in Baptist Hospital, and the lights went out, and hot, no air. We had 80 patients in there, and we had practically all the ones that was on the 7th, 6th, 5th floor. We had to bring them down in sheets. It was not nice.
From what we're hearing, we sound like we may be one of the more capable facilities as far as the least amount of damage. So we are anticipating we probably are going to get an influx of patients once things open up. So we're trying to be as ready for that as we can, and if they don't have anywhere else to go, obviously we're gonna be taking them.
The patients already in the hospital are getting news of how bad things are in the city.
I mean, they're not only sick, but they only had to account for some of the sons, daughters, and there is no way to know.
Despite the circumstances, doctors say patients are more generous than normal.
In the last few days, I've seen more people saying thank you that I haven't seen in ages, and in difficult circumstances. I thought it's a privilege, to be here.
Doctors, nurses, and other support workers are uplifted by considerate patients. Nonetheless, they are on an emotional roller coaster.
We thought we knew what had happened, and we thought we knew it was going to happen. Well, it turns out we were wrong, because things started getting worse again as the water started to rise in the central business district.
Some of us still don't know if our families are okay. We have a nurse here who doesn't know if our son and her husband are alive, and I have probably at least 15 feet of water in my home from what I can get a report of.
I had 3 boats and a nice home in Chalmette, and everything's gone. And last I heard from my neighbor, he got in a boat and drove right over the top of where my house was, so there's nothing left.
Employees can simply look outside now to see how the high water has reduced many of the people of their city to beggars. Dozens of evacuees are showing up at the hospital each day. They need food, water, and a place to lay their heads. All too often, the victims include frightened children. Some of the adults are on life-sustaining equipment that is working fine. These people don't need to be hospitalized. They need a safe, dry place to stay. Hospital employees urge the displaced to try to find refuge with family members or in shelters.
We specifically wanted to make sure we took care of residents with acute needs that we thought we could do something for. We didn't want to become a shelter for patients who needed just purely food, water, housing, clothing. That would jam the ED and jam the hospital, and we wouldn't be available to take care of the real victims of the hurricane. Of course, they're all victims, but we want mainly illness and injury.
Among those requesting health care, police officers, electricians, and other support personnel needed to protect and rebuild what's left of New Orleans.
What I'm going to do is put this band on you, and I'm going to get a young man to walk with your prescriptions around the pharmacy.
Many people are out of medication because the hurricane hit at the end of the month. Larger numbers of prescriptions are filled at the beginning of the month because of entitlements to social services, which further complicates the situation. Ochsner has one of the few pharmacies operating in New Orleans.
All they know is, we're going to get this medicine from you from the hospital. You're going to have to wait a few minutes. It's going to take 30 to 45 minutes to fill it, but then you don't have to go anywhere else.
Some of the sick resort to sharing medicines.
As long as they were the same medicines, the same dosages, and they could, with a little bit of sophistication, make that exchange and use other people's medicines. If it was identical, I don't have a problem with that. I don't think anyone would. When diabetics or hypertensive patients miss their medicines, it can be devastating.
Emotions become more intense as workers look out on the constant flow of destitute people and meditate on their own predicament.
You know, we're crying together, we're hugging together, we're snapping each other together. You know, we have short fuses.
I'm aggravated and I'm hot and all this stuff, and I'm drinking 1.5 gallons of water on my shift of 12 hours, but still, I'm still fatigued, and, you know, but I'm here and I'm trying to just get through the night.
Sometimes it gets difficult, and sometimes when we're moments alone, especially after we've seen all the destructions, that, you know, he starts crying a little bit, and then we talk it out with our colleagues, and everybody's sharing the same story.
To sit here in this ivory tower and watch your city just disappear underwater is, I would say, surreal. This is the training that you don't get in any other situation. It doesn't do anybody any good if I freak out, and so I try not to, but, you know, the gravity settles in. And that's all there is to that. You can have all the gravity you want, but you're still going to have to go do your job.
Some staffers even manage to squeeze in a little entertainment.
Our phlebotomist taught us how to do the bus stop one evening after they had gotten off from work. We've had poetry. We've had one of our employees play the piano. Our chairman, Dr. Rodwig, actually played the piano tonight in the atrium for us.
There is little time to sulk in despair or try to relax. Ochsner executives know the rising water could isolate them from the rest of the world. They don't know how long they would be cut off or what their needs would be. With this in mind, they speed up efforts to get their sickest patients out of the hospital. Other hospitals rush to the rescue. The sick and premature babies are divided between Women's Hospital in Baton Rouge and the University of Alabama Medical Center in Birmingham.
They took the helicopter and the jet to Homa and used the helicopter to go in and out of the hospital. They said the nurses and doctor were pretty careful, and they're going back today. They're going to take them some cold drinks and T-shirts to change into. It's 100 degrees in the nursery.
One baby can't be transported because of his life support equipment. Older patients are being sent mostly to Memorial Hermann.
We're okay with them just going into the system and being triaged and sent wherever Baton Rouge, wherever they get triaged to. So this way, at least I'll have a list and we can orderly go through it and say, okay, this is the next 15 patients that are going to go.
The Louisiana Office of Emergency Preparedness is still too overwhelmed to help Ochsner relocate patients.
We've had calls from around the area that people will take our patients. There's been a triage set up at the LSU Maravich Assembly Center, and we're arranging buses after buses, our Ochsner vehicles, to send either families, patients, whomever wants to go out of the area.
We've also determined who needs oxygen, who needs telemetry, who could transfer by bus, who needs ambulance.
Meanwhile, the hospital replenishes its food supply.
48 hours after the storm, as the water kept approaching the building, we were nonstop loading up food and water from the Save Center warehouse. Actually, finally we stopped doing it because the water was 4 feet deep by the warehouse and swamped the truck. And it wasn't just receiving. There was Dr. Adolf. You know, he said, hey, I'm not a surgeon right now. I'm anything you want me to be.
There were people in the loading dock, including myself, I guess, putting stuff in the, from the truck to take to the kitchen. It's an amazing experience.
Administrators, doctors, and nurses are occasionally able to get on the internet or steal a few minutes in front of television monitors. They are getting a better picture of just how traumatic the situation is in New Orleans.
We know that there's, mass hysteria, meltdowns, whatever. This is normal. This is natural, y'all. This is a disaster of unprecedented proportion. Really, for the country, it sounds like, with hundreds and thousands of people homeless, and we're all some of those. It's going to get worse in some cases. We're all not immune to that. So we each have our meltdown moments. We buoy each other up, and we go on.
Amid the heavy workload, the heat, the scenes of hot, tired, hungry, thirsty people, the fears of what's going on in their own homes, a growing number of employees become testy.
We're approaching 48 hours after the storm, and everyone thought things would be getting better. So earlier today, people recognized things were not getting better. If not, they were getting worse. And so there was a lot of sort of hysteria and stress that built up.
Sunday and Monday, we were very focused on the effects of the storm. On Tuesday, we obviously started to worry about the threat of flooding. And on Wednesday, Thursday, we were very much focused on the violence.
The looting's increasing, fires and arsons increasing, and it looks like it's going to get worse before it gets better.
I had to sleep in on sofa with a gun in my hand just to make sure that nobody breaks into my house.
There's been rumors that people have taken over, drug seekers have taken over Charity Hospital at gunpoint to try to get drugs. So they're hearing these types of things and thinking, hey, we're out here. How long before they get here to try to come in and take us over?
Reports are also surfacing of patients being put to death to prevent their suffering. Many of the rumors, including the one about a takeover of Charity's pharmacy, prove untrue.
Spread no rumors in front of people. People feed on it. Some people greet each other with the latest rumor. You don't do it.
Meanwhile, the evacuation of the sickest patients is well underway.
I had a heart transplant about a month ago, being shipped out to Houston Heart Institute.
Even as Ochsner evacuates patients, others are continuing to show up, though at a slow pace.
There are people with pneumonias, congestive heart failure, diabetes, infections, HIV. It's like a wide variety of patients we're seeing. And then there are people covering the intensive care unit. Those are people who are dependent on ventilators. And then there is our hematology, cancer patients, nephrology patients. We're not able to offer all the services. This is going to be the minimum, bare minimum care.
We're seeing lacerations and individuals falling off the roof or stepping on glass and nails.
Donald Sylvester is among the patients who have been admitted to the hospital. The California musician was in New Orleans to record a CD when Katrina moved inland. He and his wife had to tread through several feet of water to get to high ground.
I mean, I hadn't had dialysis since that Friday before, and I was sitting on the porch soaking wet, shivering. And when she saw that, she kind of said, "No, I'm getting you out of here. You cannot stay here, Tuck. You know, you're getting sick, you know." And I was really sick, but I didn't let her know because, I mean, I didn't want to, you know, come off like I was needed help more than anybody else. So she built the raft.
Sylvester's wife manages to get him to the hospital, but she's left behind because there's not enough room for her on the boat. The diabetic is diagnosed with pneumonia, but he's more concerned about what's happened to his wife when a nurse tries to comfort him.
I kind of lost it if it wasn't for Christy. I don't know what would have happened because had she not been there to console me, I would have lost it all, man. I would have lost it all. Pressure was to a point where they couldn't control it. But all I could see was my wife out in the elements, man. And
other nurses are just as giving. The couple is reunited a day later. Meanwhile, 2 young women go into labor while camped out at Lafayette High School.
They brought the raft and put me on it, put blankets and pillows, and told me just pray to God. And I asked God to get me here safely. When I got here, they hooked me up to the monitors. Her heart was beating fine. Everything was going steady. And at 4:11, I gave birth to her. They said she was healthy, she was active, and I was just tickled pink because everything was all right.
Shavante Hilton has floated to dry land on a different makeshift boat. She had her baby in the back of a pickup truck just minutes before getting to the hospital.
I'm glad this was open because I don't know what I would have did.
Away from the hospital, one of Ochsner's resident surgeons has made his way to a rescue site at Causeway and Interstate 10, a few miles from the hospital. Thousands of people are walking, swimming, boating, or being driven to this location. It is simply the highest accessible site west of the city for people trying to leave New Orleans. Water and food is slowly making it to this site. Many of the people here are suffering from hunger and dehydration. Fortunately, Dr. Scott Delacroix has help already in place.
Guys like these troopers from Arkansas, Austin, Texas, brought down their entire EMS crew, brought down a couple $1 million worth of equipment, 4 ambulances, a command and control center. At that point, we still had about 5,000 patients. We were starting to get people down from the Superdome. We were starting to get some gunshots. Anybody acute, we'd air vac them out. They were going to Moisant, Armstrong Airport. Everyone else, we were convoying people who could walk in buses. Everyone who couldn't walk, we put them in ambulances. We were packing ambulances with 2 stretchers and 6 to 8 patients, plus putting people in the front seats. Just seeing the things people are bringing down to us is nice. The most frustrating thing is everyone's working independently, and there's really no central command even in Baton Rouge.
Back at the hospital, executives discover many of their employees have some basic needs of their own. They decide to make a trip to the neighborhood Walmart, a store that has been locked down for the hurricane.
They needed, supplies. They needed, personal effects, just minor things.
We called the state police. This was all legal. Legal looting is what we called it. Most people probably just, showed up with enough soap and toothpaste, and deodorant and everything else for a few days. And so we hit those aisles and we were filling up garbage cans full of all those types of items. And then it also hit us that, you know, we have a lot of women in our organization, and, you know, we need feminine products and we need those kinds of things. So then all of a sudden we turned it to wiping out the shelves of those items. Actually, the people from Walmart showed up while we were there. Then as we carted everything out, we had to count it, and you know, they just wanted a list of everything we had taken.
There is another need that is perhaps more urgent, the need for employees to know they will have a paycheck to help them rebuild their lives.
They had their families in other locations. We had employees that evacuated that needed their money very badly.
Getting paychecks out on time and bringing in needed supplies provides some comfort. But by Thursday, doctors and nurses are growing more weary as they get more details on their own property. Plus, the situation isn't improving at the hospital.
We have 5,000 of our 7,000 employees had damaged or lost homes, and all the associated events that go with that. What about my family members, of course? What about our neighbors? They were able to put that aside and focus on patients.
My mom lived a block off the beach in Gulfport, and her house is now part of the Gulf of Mexico.
The most difficult part was having some of the really young nurses, one who was pregnant, one who has never been away from her family situation except for college, and then having a few that they was totally separated because their husbands also had jobs that took them away from their children.
You take a bath in a sink, you know, with a little bit of trickle of water, at least you can clean up, you know.
Staffers have their complaints, but most also appreciate the opportunity to make a contribution to their city.
It's just seeing all these devastated people. You know, the National Guard has come in a few times and with these truckloads full of people. They pick them up from the Superdome and, you know, there's no warning. They just show up and we back them into the loading dock and we put them all on stretchers, and these people were so poorly cared for and just so sick. I can tell you that I'm not going to leave these people stranded. I feel like it is my obligation to see this through. That's the least I could do. You know, and it's my job at that. I would do it for free, I really would.
One of Amy's patients is an 87-year-old who has kidney problems. He has spent 2 days in his attic with nothing but a case of soft drinks and a box of chocolates.
I just couldn't help but sob at his bedside. You know, it was like, you know, as long as y'all are okay with me crying while I'm working, I'm okay with it.
Staffers can't help but be encouraged by the volunteers who are coming into the hospital for treatment. Some have been working for days, while spending their nights sleeping on the roofs of flooded-out homes.
That thing is it's often helping people getting food for everybody at a Walmart, driving around and pulling people off roofs, hundreds. We must have pulled at least 200 people out. Every time we go to Walmart to get food, it's like the water was like...
You can't see that. It was so dirty, and we caught you on glass, and...
You just keep knocking your shins.
Among the volunteers, a crew from North Carolina. They've found a bus with the engine running. The crew uses the bus to rescue staffers and patients from Bywater Hospital. Among them, a paraplegic.
Nobody wouldn't have to get him down. I said, I'll get him down for you. So he was in the hospital? Yes, on the 3rd floor. We had to take ropes and stick in that basket and shoot him down the steps and hold him back.
Ochsner tells the rescue team they have to take their patients further east.
We gave him directions as to how to kind of move out of town and get to a facility where he could have the people on his bus be helped, because really we were in a situation at that point where we did not have the capability or the capacity. I mean, we were full.
Much of the pressure of treating patients is being taken off Ochsner as rescue teams transport more patients to Baton Rouge's Pete Maravich Center. Meanwhile, Ochsner's new pathologist has made his way to the convention center. Thousands of people have taken refuge there. Many have been without food or water for several days.
It was bad. I can't describe to you what it's like to see 15 or 20,000 people on the street in that state of mind. It was a series of experiences that all sort of are equal in challenge. It was the challenge of recalling primary care medicine, not only recalling primary care medicine, but then after you recall it, to try to think of what makeshift solutions you can come up with because you don't have the materials that you remembered that you should use if you had them. The challenge of dealing with my own stress and sleep deprivation, the challenge of dealing with that amount of human emotion and anguish all in one time.
Just hours after finishing up duty on the interstate, Resident Scott Delacroix and a Baton Rouge physician are flown in to check on about 150 people stranded in an apartment complex. The doctors are under the protection of state police because of gunfire in the city. The physicians find some people who are suffering from dehydration. Fortunately, they have water.
Well, now I know what hell is like. No, it's been difficult. It really has. I mean, we don't have water, and our toilets don't flush.
The trouble comes when the Black Hawk tries to return to pick up the crew.
We could hear the gunshots every time a helicopter would approach. There were gunshots from the other side of the bayou, so none of them would land. Finally, about 10 o'clock, 6 hours later, we were able to get a Black Hawk to land, and we got out of there.
Back at the hospital, patients are being shipped out as fast as they come in, which is a relief to some staffers. It means they may finally have time to pay more attention to their personal affairs. But administrators are considering the long-term consequences for their staff, the hospital, and the city of New Orleans if they succeed in evacuating all of the patients.
Do we really want to empty out all our volume and lose the income? So just throwing it out there, should we slow this down, give ourselves a breather to figure it out? Should we say only those who, quote, need to go, want to go first, and then hold the people that really are still getting active treatment and need to be here?
Are they better staying or are they better going? And obviously our nursing staff and those folks were trying to sort that out. I mean, economically, we lost $70 million at the end of 2005. It was a big hit to us, and we didn't receive virtually any funding. Even today, as we sit in 2007, no funding.
As staffers mull over whether they want to shut down the hospital, they have an issue that needs to be addressed immediately. Again, it involves the top floor of the hospital.
Besides being on the top floor for the wind, heat rises. So while we were out without the air conditioning, our floor got extremely hot.
It didn't matter who you were. It didn't matter what it said on your ID tag. It was, we're moving these patients to a different floor where it's cooler, and it was 11:30 at night. So we just did it and took 30 minutes versus if we had probably done it in a normal course and hadn't had outside help, probably would have taken several hours.
The heat is much worse in the cafeteria.
When the air conditioning was out, the kitchen was 120 degrees heat. We had folks that were passing out from heat exhaustion, and those folks didn't say, I'm going to go sleep for a couple days. They were treated, they got hydrated, and you couldn't keep them out of the kitchen.
In another corner of the hospital, people are bombarding the pharmacy, more than what pharmacists can handle. Doctors are taking on new roles.
As the line started backing up, I helped them, stock the shelves. But if people would come up and they didn't have their medicines, I'd sit down with them and try to talk to them and figure out what medicines they were on, and then I could write the prescription, and we just turned around and filled it and gave it to them on the spot.
5 days into the hurricane, a major breakthrough for Ochsner.
We had ordered generators from multiple places because we weren't sure who was really going to be able to deliver. Everybody we called said, we're going to try. So we just said, well, give us what you can. And Friday, actually, a lot of them showed up. And it was a big relief because we could start to get air conditioning, start to get back to some normalcy.
I think that with the air conditioning now on, we're in really a different state, and with the water certainly not rising, I think that we're feeling okay.
The generators end all talk of evacuating the hospital. This clears the way for Ochsner to focus more on the community. The top administrators don't have to go any further than their parking lot to find people asking for help.
We've been offered $1,000 for them to take the elderly lady. Nobody would take her. They said that the ambulance service said that whoever's taking over the situation for the government has control of their ambulance service.
Administrators help their neighbors get the medications they need and then help them get out of the city. Ochsner also beefs up staffing at the rescue site along Causeway and Interstate 10, treating dozens and helping distribute some of the many supplies now flowing into New Orleans.
We tried to basically establish a system where we could take care of those that were too ill to travel to the next step. And you had about 10 minutes, 5 minutes really to get the patients off of the helicopter before the helicopter would have to power off. And so we had to develop a system where we could run to the helicopter and see if somebody needed any medical care and then move them through.
And then, late Friday,
we got Energy's power back. That was a big deal. It was like Christmas in September for us.
The city's water service begins pumping water into the hospital again on Monday, exactly 1 week after the storm. With week 1 over, Ochsner begins to get more of its B team back into the hospital.
It was difficult for Team B to leave, their families and their situation to come as well and not know when they would be able to go back to take care of their home situation. You could definitely sense that camaraderie amongst the Team A folks, and you did sort of feel like you missed something.
Staffers realize they have survived the worst of the storm. They also realize they have no choice but to go on. The people of their city need them.
I had to talk to the paramedics, the EMS units, everybody I could call and think of to get me to a dialysis center. The only place that was working in this city was Ochsner. So they finally came this morning, which is a Sunday.
The patients include one of the men trying to pump the water out of New Orleans.
I started running out of my medication, which is, essential to me doing my job or, living any kind of a life. I talked to somebody on the radio and told them I have to have it. I run out. I'm going to have to lock the station and just leave and try and paddle my way to a doctor. I don't know what else to do. So he said, no, don't do that. We'll see if we can get a helicopter to pick you up. And the helicopter did show up. And, when I got here, I was just, I was so frazzled. And, I was just, about ready to burst.
Employees are still excited about something as simple as a Salvation Army hot dog or hamburger. And it is almost a divine experience to be able to eat barbecue on the grounds of the hospital.
The day of the cookout was like get out of jail because we had batting the hatches down literally. But we also recognize that people get cabin fever pretty quickly, particularly when it's unair conditioned and you have a full house and many of these people are very sick.
The people doing the cooking? The hospital's administrators and doctors. The toughest part may be over, but there's still much more work to be done.
I lived in my office on a mattress for 5 weeks. I was the only one in our pediatric building. I called it the Michael Jordan House because it's 2 stories, 40,000 square feet. I've never had 5 weeks of more intense activity in medicine in my whole life. Every hour was like an emergency.
Situations like this is going to make you better because we're going to take care of patients. And I know this has to do with no money. It doesn't care about insurance, no money, no nothing. I know that we will take care of them.
More than a year after Hurricane Katrina, Ochsner's patient load is up slightly. It's helping to train many of the resident doctors who would have been fully trained at Tulane and the 300-bed charity hospital that has not reopened. Tulane is open, but it is still down more than 80 beds because part of the hospital flooded.
We have half of the clinical rotations for Tulane, for example, occur here for the medical students. We have 350 of our own, and then we've moved over to make training opportunities for others.
The state has opened a trauma center in New Orleans to replace the one that operated out of the charity system prior to Katrina. The Ochsner Medical Center has purchased 3 new hospitals amid research showing that 1 out of every 3 people living in New Orleans may still want to leave. Many perceive a higher crime rate in the Crescent City, but police say crime is really down more than 40%. The city's population is also down by more than 40%.
We have not hedged the bet. From day one, our board has said, draw the line in the sand, our city will shrink no more. We will do everything in our power to return the city to where it was, and more importantly, to bring it to a better future.
Hospitals all over the city are putting in their own wells and finding high ground for the generators so that they will be able to survive the next storm. Of course, no one knows whether it will come in the next few months, the next few years, or the next 50 years. but everyone appears certain there will be another hurricane. All are also hopeful the levees will hold and there will not be another flood. But if it does happen, hospitals have learned some fundamental lessons about preparing for hurricanes and floods, beginning with what resources to have on hand.
We had always figured that if we had 36 to 48 hours of supplies and fuel and that sort of thing, we'd be in pretty good shape. As it turns out, I think we're thinking more like a week might be a better situation. It's very difficult to put everything on backup generation power, but air conditioning, critical systems, computer systems, those types of things, making sure that you have water for labs, those types of things are critical. We've all learned that something of this magnitude really requires a federal response. We found that once the military got involved, things really started moving quicker.
It was a hurricane that devastated New Orleans. But if you think about it, hospitals everywhere run some risk, be it a tornado, a flood, an earthquake, terrorism, or avian flu. Are the hospitals in your community prepared to survive the storm?
To order a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or write to Surviving the Storm, 7733 Perkins Road, Baton Rouge, Louisiana 70810. Funding for Surviving the Storm has been provided by AT&T, Lehman Brothers, Cardinal Health Foundation, and by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.